we'll try to help you along the way.
Thank you. I'm going to share the screen here. Let's see. And I'm going to go into the slideshow.
Great.
First, I wanted to start by saying how much I appreciated your announcement. So I put that on my first slide, actually. I thought it was very well done. And
we'll tell.
And I also liked your headline there. Imagine a different world, a peaceful world. And I think it's important that we can hold up a vision, because I think the important thing of a leader is to hold up a vision. And if people buy into it, they will use their skills to make that vision into reality. Because leaders don't necessarily have all the knowledge to make things into reality, but people who have different skills can do that. So my job here is to hold up the vision of a more peaceful world. And grassroots peacemaking, which is a method that we started to develop back in 2014, is a different paradigm in conflict resolution. But it actually originated out of the Rotary spirit, because we Rotarians, we have friends all over the world, and we're in 210 countries and territories with Rotary clubs, and we all get along. And I think the grassroots peacemaking is really following the Rotary spirit. For example, the philosophy of grassroots peacemaking is that peace is win-win, war is lose-lose. And in the old days, history books teaches us that the great heroes are the ones that won wars. Genghis Khan, Napoleon, etc., Caesar. But the times are different now. The old days don't work anymore. And I'll tell you why, because in the old days, we didn't really know how horrendous wars were. They were out and they were bloody wars, but then they came home, and if they were victorious, they were celebrated and so on. But since our last century, the 20th century, when we have cameras like in the Vietnam Wars, we really started to see how horrendous the wars are. And the war in Ukraine, for example, we are now with social media, we really find out how terrible wars are. And the people at the grassroots level are now empowered to do something about working towards peace. And for example, when Bismarck in the 1800s conquered a part of Germany, which is now Schleswig-Holstein, that was very profitable. But of course, when Saddam tried to conquer Kuwait, it didn't work as well for him, and he ended up being executed. And of course, now when Russia is trying to conquer Ukraine, that doesn't work either. So times are different. So it's very easy to start a war, and it's very difficult to end a war. So therefore, it's very important to do what we can to avoid war to begin with. Modern wars are expensive with no end in sight. This is what America has spent on wars in Afghanistan, $2.3 trillion. Iraq, $1.9 trillion. Syria, $1.2 trillion. A total of $5.4 trillion. And what have we gained by spending all this money? I would say we haven't gained anything. In fact, these countries are worse off now than when we started. In addition to that, we probably have an estimated $6 trillion in benefits to war veterans. More than 400,000 people have died. Another 10 million people have been displaced. So clearly, if you look at it as a businessman, or let's say a Wall Street investor, what's the yield on the investment? Nothing. We just wasted a lot of money. and a lot of suffering. War in Ukraine is estimated to cost up to $600 billion. And of course, the Russian has lost 218,000 soldiers and a lot of equipment. 300,000 plus educated people have fled Russia. A lot of loss of intellectual resources. And another 300,000 men are now trying to escape the draft. And of course, in Ukraine, they have lost a lot of people also. And they expect to have lost a lot of money there also in destroyed buildings. So peacemaking, on the other hand, typically costs less than 1%, even a 1/100% of war in the back end. So 1/100% of $600 billion is $60 million. That looks like a lot of money, but that's a savings of $594 billion if we could have avoided this war. And this is what I'm talking about. And I mean, it makes sense that if 60 million seems more attractive than spending 600 billion. People at the grassroots level want peace. The leaders are the ones that want war. And the only possibility for peace is that everybody wins. You can't have winners and losers, because if one party loses and the other party wins, then the losers are gonna seek revenge. So there has to be a peace based on a win-win situation. I'll give you an example. Europe suffered wars for many centuries. And I mean, many of you are from Europe, so, and I was born in Sweden myself. But with the European Union, Europe has experienced peace and prosperity since 1945. And this is probably the most prosperous time in European history. Germany and Japan have built great prosperity without war industries or any major war industries. For example, Germany and Japan have converted the following companies into civilian productions. In Germany, for example, IG Farben became Bayer and BASF. Auto Union, for example, who made tanks or military vehicles, is now known as Audi. Messerschmitt, who made warplanes, is now part of Airbus. And Mercedes-Benz, of course, they made military and vehicles. And of course, we know Mercedes-Benz as a luxury vehicle. And Japan, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Toshiba, Kawasaki, they were major producers of war materials, and they now very profitable and very successful producing civilian and commercial production. So the argument that you need to have a military war in order to have profitability doesn't really work. Now, let's look at Southeast Asia. Millions of people died 50 years ago in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. That was 50 years ago. Now they live in peace, building hotels and shopping malls. And Vietnam, we were in Vietnam, lost 50,000 lives to stop the expansion of communism. And now Vietnam is our ally. And if we had read the history books carefully, we would have learned that the real enemy of Vietnam would have been China for centuries. And it's still China. So that's why Vietnam wants to be an ally of America, so they can protect them from China. Now, we have a method for grassroots peacemaking. It's a 4-step method. First, you agree on the philosophy. And our philosophy is that peace is win-win, war is lose-lose. If you don't agree on this philosophy, then of course you can't have peace, because if one party thinks they're going to win in a war, then of course the other party has to defend itself. And by the way, I'm not anti-military. I think that the military used in the proper way could be an instrument for policing the peace. I just have a problem with how the military has been used. But I'm supporting of a strong military. Then once you have agreed on the philosophy, then you develop a vision. And it's very important to have a vision. And the vision is based on what everybody can win, based on win-win with peace. And once you have developed the vision, then you develop a mission. And the mission should be supported by the agreed vision. And once you have developed the mission, then you go into action and implement the agreed mission. Well, this may sound very blue sky and unreal thinking, but we actually have we have been practicing this for a number of years now. I think most people think of North Korea as a very hostile and a dangerous state. But here, Sundra and I are together with the ambassador of North Korea, and I presented him with this, and he read it very carefully, and he asked if we could keep it. And we also have a friend that we got to know in Sweden, who was a diplomat in Sweden, and we developed a relationship with him from North Korea and his wife. For 3 years, we used to have lunches with him. He's now back in Pyongyang. And later on, I learned that he was actually a relative of Kim Jong-un. But we're still in a dialogue with him, and I've heard that North Korea doesn't answer emails or calls from America or from many other parties, but they do answer when we contact them. Here we're also in contact with South Korea. So here is North Korea, different diplomats, and here we are together in the North Korean mission under the portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And here's with the South Korean ambassador who came to one of our breakfast meetings. And we're actually in contact with South Korea also. And I believe we have been able to contribute to that. There hasn't been any fire between those two. Unfortunately, when they do military maneuvers in the South, North Korea feels threatened. So, but instead of attacking South Korea, they shoot rockets into the ocean, Pacific Ocean. So it's basically a fireworks show. Many world leaders actually support grassroots peacemaking. And the United Nations, for example, here we are together with Antonio Guterres, who is the General Secretary of the United Nations. And here I'm together with Ban Ki-moon, who was the predecessor. Here I'm giving a speech at the United Nations. And here we're together with Nobel Prize laureate Oscar Arias Sanchez. We also have good relationships with the Holy See. Here is a picture of the nuncio of the Holy See, who reports directly to the Pope. And here is with us in New York, and we different pictures. This nuncio is now stationed in Madrid, but we have also we're also getting to know the new nuncio. We also have good relationships with members of the Congress. Here we are with Nancy Pelosi, and here we are with the late Elijah Cummings. I had a conversation with Nancy Pelosi about North Korea, and she told me that she had actually been to North Korea, and she seemed genuinely interested in North Korea. But, well, I tell you, Islamic Republic of Iran is another hostile nation that is but we have very good relationships with them. Here we are together. Here we had the previous ambassador, Kosovo, come and speak at one of our meetings. And here is another meeting with his successor, Ravanchi. And this is the video of this meeting is posted on YouTube. But I'll tell you that with the grassroots peacemaking with the $60 million, we could actually, I think we showed that we could actually develop a better relationship with countries like North Korea and Iran. And that would certainly cost much less than we what otherwise when we use the military. And for, let's say, for example, we would get an apartment across the street from the United Nations, and we would invite diplomats for lunches and dinners and develop social relationships with them. And then we could probably have a lot of conflict resolution that way. And we could also fly to different places. I've, for example, been invited to fly to South Korea to meet with the president of South Korea. It was an invitation that came this morning. We also have a really good relationship with Palestine and Egypt. This is the ambassador of Palestine, and these are Egyptian diplomats. And I tried to get the ambassador of Israel to come and speak. Couldn't get that, but we have Benny Avni, who's a very famous journalist in Israel. And here's the philosopher Bernard Henri Levy, and also a good friend, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, who is a Hasidic rabbi. We also have had Ukraine, the ambassador of Ukraine, come and speak. And so we also have a good relationships with friends in Russia. We have through our Rotary network, actually. And Cuba, we had the Cuban ambassador come and speak. And so we can actually reach diplomats and really have a communication with them. We were in Serbia in 2018 and visited the Rotary Club of Belgrade. And they asked us if we could help them negotiate peace with Kosovo. It actually turned out that Teuta, who used to be the leading diplomat of Kosovo, was in New York, and she's a Rotarian. So we have been in contact with her. And you may have noticed that there is no violence between Serbia and Kosovo. They're not friends necessarily, but at least they don't kill each other. Taiwan is another area that has been in the news lately. Here I am with the ambassador of Taiwan, who is not officially an ambassador, and here is the first secretary. But with Taiwan, it was very interesting because we had lunch with them back in 2015, and they said that we have a problem that 50% of the Taiwanese people want to pursue independence. And the deal between Nixon and Mao in 1972 was that Mao said to Nixon that we can wait 100 years to solve the Taiwan issue. But that was based on that Taiwan did not declare independence. So I explained to them that you already have independence, and if you declare independence, then the Chinese will be upset and they will cause all kinds of troubles. And that's pretty much what we saw now after Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. So anyway, 1 month later, they told me that they have now a new policy called status quo. We don't pursue independence and we don't pursue reunification. Then about a month later, the presidents of Taiwan and China met in Singapore, the only time they ever met. And after that meeting, they issued a joint statement saying that they would pursue their relationship based on status quo. So as long as Taiwan pursues that, then I don't believe that China would be a problem. But the problem with Taiwan is that the politicians, in order to be re-elected or elected in Taiwan, they have to pursue a policy of independence. And then when they elected, then they say, no, we're going to pursue status quo. And that irritates the Chinese to no end. So Rotary International, of course, we're all Rotarians. They support us also. Here is Sundra and I with Rotary International President Jennifer Jones. Here we are with the General Secretary, John Yuko, is an old friend of ours. And here, for example, with the past president, Ravi Ravindra from Sri Lanka. And Ravi has negotiated peace between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government. And here we are together with past president Gary Huang, who is also an old friend. And he is opening Rotary clubs in China. And here we are with Louis Jai and Celia Jai, who past president and past vice president. And Louis was involved with peacemaking between Chile and Argentina. They are from Chile. And they fought for many years over some islands in the southern tip of the South American continent. And now, but through their Rotarians connections, they were able to they inspired the governments to negotiate peace. So, and this is a typical picture of a grassroots peacemaking meeting where we invite ambassadors to come. This is the Palestinian ambassador. We have in our Facebook group 4,800 members in more than 100 countries around the world. And so to me, the facts are very clear. Peace is win-win, war is lose-lose. And our argument is based on self-interest. For example, if you're Mother Teresa, you expect to have a higher spiritual awareness and so on. And that may reach 5% of the people. Well, if you argue self-interest, then you may reach the other 95% of the people. And it's very clear to me that it's in everybody's self-interest to have peace. So our mission is basically to educate everybody because I don't believe anybody starts a war if they think they're going to lose. But so anybody who starts a war thinks they're going to win. But the reality is there are no winners in wars anymore. So we just need to come out with that. So this is my contact information, by the way. Matt says grassrootspeacemaking.org, and my phone number is 646-526-8725. So if anybody is interested in participating with us in this, you're welcome to contact me. And that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions, and don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. I'm ready for anything you can throw at me.
Thank you so much, Mats. And first of all, apologies from our president, who has a very bad internet connection right now, but I can see, Albert, you're back.
Here,
Can you hear us and see us?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, man.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So thanks again, Mats, for this great presentation. I have many questions, but I would first of all ask the audience who wants to ask questions first.
Okay, I'm ready. If nobody else asked them, maybe you can ask.
No, I have a
Sure.
question.
Okay,
Okay, Cody.
You have a question, yeah?
Cody, real quick, can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and then ask your question?
Hi, sure. My name is Cody Smith. I'm a lecturer in negotiation and conflict resolution at Columbia here. I met Mats years ago when I was a Rotaractor, but that was almost a decade ago, so you probably don't remember me, Mats. But I also have worked with Professor William Urey very closely at Harvard and on some peace processes. He is famously known for the win-win sort of terminology through his book, Getting to Yes. He's more recently come up with like a concept like win-win-win, where it's like the third side win. You probably have heard of that, Matt. But some of the things that, having worked on some of the conflicts that you're describing at the track 1 level, I'm curious, first of all, I want to say congratulations on doing some of the track 1.5 work that you've done, setting up some of these meetings with North Korea, with South Korea, and these other organizations. That's a tremendous accomplishment. On the other hand, you mentioned some of these conflicts where war has definitely benefited some, where, for instance, many large corporations in the United States benefit greatly from war. Halliburton helped construct a lot of reconstruct a lot of Afghanistan and Iraq. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, these companies, their entire business model is built off of it. The internet was created largely as a result of military spending. So there are also a lot of people and companies that benefit financially from war. And so part of the question I had, there was also some challenges to the notion that wars are never won. You mentioned the Tamil Tigers. They were effectively eliminated through almost a genocidal campaign about a decade ago or so. I might be a little off on the timeline. I think it was 2009. But that was certainly a war where there was a clear winner and clear loser. Are the war in, sorry, I could name a few others, but I won't.
I see
there are certain cases.
Did you have a specific question? Because I can see a lot, I can make comments about a lot of what you said here. And this is a typical argument that I often get, that, for example, the many companies benefit economically from producing military. And of course, every congressman wants to have a military industry in their district because that's brings jobs and everything. But I believe that many of these companies that rely heavily on military production could be very successful also doing commercial productions. And I'm not saying we should stop producing military production, because I do support a strong military. But look at Germany, as I pointed out, we had a lot of the German industries and a lot of the Japanese industries. They were basically forced to change their into civilian production, and that's when, as for example, Bayer, BASF, and Audi, for example, Volkswagen, Mercedes, and Airbus, very successful companies. So I don't believe that we have to have a war production only. I think we do have to have some military production for sure. But I believe that these companies that I mentioned, I believe they're more profitable now producing commercial production than they are when they produce military production in the Second World War. And of course, when you start a war like that, I mean, Germany were completely bombed into oblivion, and also Japan. And now they don't have to be bombed; they can be very profitable. So that's one question. And I have to tell you that I don't know much about the situation in Sri Lanka. So I just mentioned that Ravi was involved with that. So, but I understand that Sri Lanka has a lot of problems right now, and but maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
One quick follow-up on that, if I may.
Okay.
How much do you think the fact that Japan and Germany both were placed under America's nuclear umbrella has allowed them, effectively the United States has subsidized the security of both of those countries? And how much do you think that has allowed them to shift in this way, so that their companies like Bayer are allowed to focus on just the domestic needs and production?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We certainly don't want South Korea or Japan or Germany to have nuclear weapons. That would not be a good idea, and I don't think they need to. And again, that's an argument for that they really don't need to. North Korea has nuclear weapons, and we know from our conversations with the North Koreans that the only reason they have nuclear weapons is that Kim Jong-un believed that he would lose power if he gave up nuclear weapons within 6 months. So that tells me that he is not interested in attacking South Korea with nuclear weapons, or Japan or China or America. He just wants to preserve his own power. And so, but of course, that I think they were forced to do it, but it also shows Germany and Japan, they were forced to do it, but it showed that it was profitable.
Hey, that's really great. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, I can hear
Thank
you.
you so much, Matt. I think we're gonna have time for one more question before we move along in our meeting, which we only have 1 hour to do.
Okay.
And I don't know, I saw Ben maybe has a question. Ben, do you still have a question for Matt?
I do, unless someone else has an urgent question.
Okay,
So
one.
if that's okay for you guys. So I studied economics, and of course, this also includes game theory. And I cannot imagine that there is no situation that a war may, under all circumstances, not be profitable in the case that you are successful. So successful means, of course, not killing people. That's not a success. But you know, it's for me, who has not very often dealt with this topic, I can imagine that there are many examples. Not Russia versus Ukraine. That's like very special and very extreme. But like other reasons where a country could say, well, the status quo is not something that should last. So we are willing to pay a certain price to change that, and we believe that we can basically win this fight. So I don't want to euphemize the war topic, but this win-win situation sounds so way too simple for me, even though I wish that it was that case all the time.
Well, if you have a question where people are unhappy, you could use the grassroots peacemaking 4-step method and try to use that see how everybody could win. And well, actually, Cody mentioned also that we got the internet because of the military and so on. That's true, but we also got the microcomputer industry because of the space race. And the reason for that was that we had to minimize all the electronics in order to, because the rockets could only lift so much. And these guys were on the federal budget, on the space budget. And then of course, Nixon, when he came into power, he fired them all because he cut the budgets. And now they had to figure out how can we make money privately in a commercial industry. And there were 2 jobless engineers that started Intel, and they made a traffic light controller chip, and and that started the microcomputer industry. So you can have these things come out, and so these things can happen peacefully also. But of course, the airplane industry sped up because of the war. But I don't think it has to be a war in order to have it, because they have seen that happen. I believe in competition, though. You can have competition without killing each other.